Good day, everyone, and welcome to the International Positive Psychology Association conference call. As a reminder, today's call is being recorded. At this time, I'd like to turn the call over to your Associate Executive Director, Mr. David J. Follet. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Melanie. Welcome, everyone, to our fourth International Positive Psychology Association education call. Thank you for joining us. We are grateful that you are here. This is the fourth and final event of the year in our Positive Psychology Leaders Series. Today we feature one of the world's top scholars and researchers in positive psychology, Dr. Sonia Lubomirsky. More than 500 of you have registered for the call from over 30 countries. Wherever you are in the world, we sure appreciate your membership in IPA. And I particularly want to thank our members who are joining us early in the morning or late at night in their countries. There is nothing like participating in a live call. And for those who were unable to attend today, we always make sure to provide a recording of each of our calls to the membership. And we will continue to rotate the time of our calls to make it easier for everyone to attend. And again, thank you for those of you who are here with us early or late in the day. We appreciate your investing your time with us. We recently sent out an email letting you know how to download the PowerPoint presentation for this call. If you need that link now to download Dr. Lubomirsky's presentation, you can email info@ipanetwork.org. Again, you may email info@ipanetwork.org, and we will make sure to send you the link to the presentation. It is not necessary for the call, but it would be helpful, and we will respond to all of you even if it takes a few minutes to do so. For those of you who are joining our IPA educational program for the first time, let me briefly tell you about the Positive Psychology Leaders Series. This educational program was established to share with you the latest research and insights from the field of positive psychology. In this program, we invite top leaders from the field of positive psychology to present directly to the IPA membership. And each program is exclusively arranged for members of the International Positive Psychology Association. You will not find this program anywhere else in the world, and it comes to you at no additional cost. Your membership dues in IPA cover this entire series and a whole lot more. It is our privilege and honor to offer you this program. Additionally, in the monthly IPA Association newsletter, we include the bonus interviews I conduct with each of our positive psychology leaders prior to these calls. My colleague, IPA Associate Executive Director Debbie Swick, publishes this monthly newsletter for us. You can find my recent interviews with Dr. Lubomirsky, Dr. Ruth Veenhoven, Dr. Ed Diener by logging into the member-only portion of our IPA website. Just click on the Communities tab, and you will find a link to all of our newsletters. Now, before we begin our main event today, we would like to start by offering you a brief update on IPA, and to do those honors, it is my pleasure to introduce our IPA Executive Director. He's the Director of Education and Senior Scholar in the Positive Psychology Center at the University of Pennsylvania. He directs the Masters of Applied Positive Psychology program at the university and is a special advisor to the Positive Psychology Steering Team. He is the author of the book, Dynamic Individualism of William James. Please welcome our IPA Executive Director, Dr. James Pawelski. Hi, James.
Hi, David. Hey, thanks so much for that introduction. Boy, it's great to be back on another one of these calls. You've done another great job of organizing a real informative call. I know that Sonia Lubomirsky's work is both important from a research standpoint and really exciting from a practitioner standpoint as well. So I know that everyone on the call is going to get a lot of good stuff from this lecture. David, positive psychology and the International Positive Psychology Association keep on growing. I just got back a few days ago from Mexico City, Mexico, where there was the start of a new positive psychology postgraduate program. This is the fourth university in the world that now has a postgraduate program in positive psychology, and it's the first one in a language other than English. So it's a real landmark bit of progress here. It's at the Universidad Iberoamericana in Mexico City, and Margarita Tarragona, who is a board member of the International Positive Psychology Association, has started this, they call it a diplomado program. It's basically a postgraduate certificate program. A lot of very excited students launching on that program, so we certainly wish them well and welcome those students who are joining us on the call as well. We are continuing with our website renovation. We are in phase 2. We're just about ready to finish up phase 1, just about ready to move into phase 2. And so we apologize for any difficulties or clunkiness there may be in the website at this point. It's a website very much under construction, but we're very excited about the direction in which we're heading, and in a few months' time we'll have a robust social networking site where people will be able to do a lot of different things to stay connected with each other and to meet new people interested in the research and application of positive psychology around the world. So that's a really exciting continuing ongoing project. And the final thing I want to mention, David, is we are excited about progress towards the first World Congress of Positive Psychology. As I'm sure everyone knows, we just had the close of the submission process for those who wanted to present papers and posters at the Congress. And did we ever get a wonderful response? Hundreds of submissions were received from all over the world. People are going to join us at the first World Congress of Positive Psychology, June 18 to 21, 2009, here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And we absolutely welcome everyone on this call to come and join us. We already have a lot of folks who are signing up. We encourage you, if you haven't already signed up, to come to the World Congress, to do that today. This website is open, www.ipanetwork.org, and you can go on there and sign up to join us for what promises to be a really stellar event with just a lot of leading researchers and practitioners in positive psychology speaking to us, and a wonderful time to meet folks that normally we may just have virtual communication with, and now we'll be able to speak face-to-face, meet people who are engaged in all kinds of fascinating research and application of positive psychology around the world. So that's what I wanted to say, David. Let me introduce Debbie Swick, our Associate Executive Director of IPA here at the Positive Psychology Center, who's been working, as you mentioned, with the newsletter and a bunch of other things. So I'll let her give us a bit of an update as well. Debbie?
Thank you, James. I just wanted to make a comment about the benefits and the different things that we're doing, including this education series. We are over 4,000 members strong now, which is pretty amazing for the first year of an association. And in fact, it's very amazing. So thank you to all those members out there. As we come to the close of this year, we'd really love to hear your feedback. What have you thought about this educational series? How has it helped you or been interesting to you? Are you getting benefits? Do you enjoy reading the newsletter? What things would you like to see? So we'd just like to hear from you, and you can always email info@ipanetwork.org with any feedback that you have for us, and we welcome that. You can also go online now and renew your membership to ensure that you keep receiving these benefits, to ensure that you can continue to listen to these educational calls. We'll have a new lineup for next year that David will be talking about later, and also to give you a discount to that World Congress that James just talked about. So those are my updates for now, and I just look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you. Thank you, James. Great.
Thanks, Debbie. So do visit us at the website, www.ipanetwork.org. Renew your membership if you haven't already done that, and sign up to come see us face-to-face at the World Congress in June. So that's it for us, David. Now back to the talk.
All right, James, thank you. Thank you, Debbie. Thanks for sharing all the exciting news in positive psychology. It's clear that there is positive momentum all around the world. So it's now time for our main event. I want to pause to thank everyone who took the time to submit questions for Dr. Lubomirski. We will be holding a question and answer session following Dr. Lubomirski's presentation. We'll begin by answering the questions you submitted, and if time allows, we will open up the call for additional questions. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you one of the best-known positive psychology scholars in the world, Dr. Sonja Lubomirski. Dr. Lubomirski is professor of psychology at the University of California, Riverside. She graduated summa cum laude from Harvard University and received her Ph.D. in social personality psychology from Stanford University. Dr. Lubomirski has been recognized at her university with the Faculty of the Year Award and the Faculty Mentor of the Year Award. In 2002, Dr. Lubomirski was awarded a Templeton Positive Psychology Prize. Currently, she is an associate editor of the Journal of Positive Psychology, and with Ken Sheldon holds a 5-year, $1 million grant from the National Institute of Mental Health to conduct research on the possibility of permanently increasing happiness. Dr. Lubomirski is also the author of the recently released and highly acclaimed book, The How of Happiness, a scientific approach to getting the life you want. Without further ado, it is now my privilege and pleasure to welcome our Positive Psychology Leaders Series speaker today, Dr. Sonja Lubomirski. Hi, Sonja.
Thank you so much, David. I'm really happy to be here. Should I get going?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Great. I'm just delighted to be part of this series of talks and feel quite humbled being part of this illustrious group of speakers that you've assembled. So my last name, you did a great job in pronouncing it, Lubomirski. I actually have a little pronunciation key on the first slide, those of you who have my slides in front of you. Some of you may know that Lubomirski means love and peace in Russian, so it's very appropriate for a positive psychologist to have that name. So, you know, I have to say it's a little hard to do these things because I'm sort of speaking into the void. You know, I can't see anyone's faces, which is unfortunate. So once in a while I will kind of stop and maybe ask for some kind of like verbal hum from one of you guys.
With pleasure.
Great. So what I wanted to do today, with the time I have about 35 minutes, is to give you a brief overview of the work that I do on happiness and how it is possible to boost a person's happiness level beyond their natural baseline, or what's called a set point. And this is what the bulk of my research is about, as well as what my recent book, The How of Happiness, is about. So let me acknowledge my collaborators in slide 2. Now, I'm sure members of IPAR are very well aware of the fact that, you know, people are really interested in happiness and its attainment. You know, throughout history, human beings all over the world, but especially the Western world, have really been infatuated with the idea of happiness. I happen to have 105 single-spaced pages of quotes that I have collected about happiness. But don't worry, I will not be sharing them with you today. But many of those quotes are about the importance of being a happy person, the importance of happiness. A couple of surveys have actually found that North Americans, think about happiness at least once a day. So that will be all of you listening today, obviously. And so, you know, Americans are clearly preoccupied with happiness, but it turns out that surveys by researchers like Ed Diener and others have shown people really all over the globe, in almost every nation surveyed, report that happiness is an important goal. So to be happy appears to be a pretty universal goal, but is it a worthwhile goal? And I'm just going to spend a minute answering that question. And the question really is, you know, is happiness just something that feels good, or are there tangible benefits to being happy? Or can it even be said that happiness leads people to become self-absorbed or hedonistic and self-centered? Some people certainly believe that. And the answer is no, and those of you who know of my work and Ed Diener's work and Laura King's work have already know about this. So Ed Diener and Laura King and I have shown in a paper in which we reviewed 225 studies on happiness. We did a meta-analysis, which is kind of like an analysis of studies, a study of studies. So we looked at studies on what happiness is related to, and we concluded from that work, and this work is summarized in slide 3, that the pursuit of happiness is indeed a worthwhile goal. You know, it appears that happy people enjoy countless benefits. So, again, as I summarize on the third slide, happier people have been found to be more productive at work and to be more creative, to earn more money, to be better negotiators, to have more fulfilling relationships, to have more friends, to be physically healthier, and to even live longer, as you probably are aware. And rather than being self-centered, happier people are actually more other-centered. They're more charitable and helpful to others. So anyway, I don't think I need to convince too many people here who are listening right now that happiness is a good thing for many reasons. And the majority of people in the world say that they want to be happier. But is it even possible to become happier, right? Is it really possible? And if it's possible to become happier, is it possible to sustain that higher level of happiness for a long period of time? Now, unfortunately, there has been in the past not that much support for the idea that people's happiness levels can change for the better. I'm going to start by being a sort of a devil's advocate, and I'm going to give you three reasons, three arguments for why raising happiness is actually not possible or practical. So if you look at slide 4, again, I'm going to be a devil's advocate here. So the first reason to be pessimistic about the idea of increasing happiness is this idea that, it's quite clear now that a large portion of people's happiness is genetically determined. Now, this finding comes from research in the area of behavioral genetics. This is research that compares people who are identical twins to fraternal twins. And, researchers like Licken and Tellegen and quite a few others now have provided evidence based on these twin studies and also adoption studies that the heritability of happiness is about 50%. So basically what they find is that identical twins are much more similar in their happiness levels than our fraternal twins. Now, whatever the exact coefficient sort of for heritability, there's some argument about that. Its large magnitude, about 50%, suggests that for each person there is this sort of chronic or characteristic level, or you can think of it as a range of happiness that is set at birth, so that we have this set point for happiness, a baseline to which we tend to return even after we experience life's ups and downs. And this set point is assumed to be fixed and sort of not possible to influence or control. And so if that's true, if there is such a set point for happiness, this leads some people to conclude that it's futile or worthless, not worthwhile, to try to change our happiness, right, because we have this set point. So that's the first reason to be pessimistic. We'll get back to that. The second reason is that happiness appears to be a trait. It's an intrinsic part of our personality, and we know that personality doesn't change much over time. In fact, personality, and in particular the two traits that are most closely related to well-being or happiness, which are neuroticism and extroversion, they show impressive or very high stability, long-term stability. So indeed, studies have found that happiness is pretty stable across people's lives. We tend to sort of remain, to have similar levels or certainly similar ranks in happiness relative to other people. So if happiness is part of our personality, then this fact also leaves some of us a bit pessimistic about whether we can increase it. And then finally, there's a phenomenon called hedonic adaptation, which actually is something near and dear to my heart, something that I've been working on a lot recently. And what this means is that human beings are incredibly good at adapting to or getting used to most changes in their lives. So indeed, research shows that we tend to adapt and take for granted, almost everything positive that happens to us, including new wealth, new jobs, even new relationships. Speaking of relationships, I personally believe that getting married was the best thing that ever happened to me, or one of the best things that ever happened to me. But, there's been studies, there's one really famous study that was done by Rich Lucas and his colleagues that followed about 2,000 Germans over the course of 15 years and measured their life satisfaction for several years before they got married, while they got married, after they got married. And that study found that people do get a boost in happiness when they get married, but that boost lasts an average of 2 years. 2 years, after which the newlyweds sort of revert back to their original baseline or set point. So this means that ultimately our positive life circumstances, kind of positive changes in our lives, how healthy we are, how wealthy we are, how attractive we are, don't factor that much into our happiness. And so, as I mentioned, I'm currently very interested in this area, and along with my collaborator, Ken Sheldon, we have developed a theory of how people adapt to positive experiences. So anyway, so these are sort of three reasons why some people think we should be pessimistic. I've thought really hard about these reasons, these arguments for why maybe happiness cannot be increased, and I argue that pessimism is unwarranted, and I guess I wouldn't be here today if I didn't really believe that. And the reason is that despite the fact that our happiness is partially genetically determined, that's certainly true, and despite the fact that our life circumstances have a relatively small influence on how happy we are, still a very large portion of happiness, I argue, up to 40%, is in our power to change. So let me explain where that number comes from. If you look at slide 5, it shows a pie chart Also, that's why I have a pie on the cover of my book, because it illustrates a pie chart. And so basically what it does is, what that pie chart is, that illustrates all these ideas in one image. And it comes from a theory that my colleagues Ken Sheldon and David Scotty and I developed. And I have to say that the specific numbers that are shown on this pie chart are approximations and averages, so they're not really set in stone. So we assume that genetics, or the set point, accounts for about half of the variance, sort of 50% of the individual differences in happiness. So that's about 50% part of the pie. And about 10% is accounted for by life circumstances, by how, whether we're married, how healthy we are, what our gender and ethnicity is, where we live. And that leaves 40% of the individual differences in happiness kind of unexplained. This is what I call uncharted territory. And this uncharted territory, we propose, is left for intentional activities, sort of positive activities or behaviors that we can enact to become happier. Now, I should just have some caveats. Undoubtedly, some of the 40% is error, measurement error. And also, it's impossible to completely separate these three factors that I'm showing you on slide 5. Surely they interact with one another, at least somewhat. And the percentages I cite are not set in stone. But I use this as a conceptual illustration, I think people actually like to see the pie chart and sort of understand where happiness comes from. That is, when you ask the question, why are some people happier than others, that pie chart gives the answer. So importantly, this pie chart leaves 40% of individual differences in happiness for room to maneuver, room to change, room to improve. And much of my work is about how do we harness that 40%. And the way we do that is by changing the ways that we think and the ways that we act. Okay, so what do we do? There are probably hundreds of ways that people can increase their happiness. And if you look at slide 6, you will see a list of some things that show that what happy people do. Happy people are good at nurturing their relationships, committing acts of kindness, practicing optimistic thinking, savoring the present moment, exercising. So this is what research shows, that happy people tend to do these things. Now, I'm sure none of you are bowled over by seeing this list. Unless you've been living under a rock, none of these happiness strategies should surprise you. Now, the contribution of positive psychology, of course, is that all of these strategies are now squarely based in scientific research. We're now testing them empirically and systematically in experiments and studies. So I call these strategies intentional positive activities, and they include the ways that we act and the ways that we think and the goals that we follow. And I'm going to argue that such activities are the most promising means of becoming happier. Now, why is that? If you look at slide 7, it mentions the advantages of doing intentional activities as a strategy to increase our happiness. And so one of the advantages is that activities or regular exercises or regular strategies have these properties that help them to combat adaptation, so we don't get used to them, we don't take them for granted. The thing about activities is that, number one, we can vary how we engage in them, so that's a variety. One of my favorite quotes is from Santayana, and he said, "To be interested in the changing seasons is a happier state of mind than to be hopelessly in love with spring." And again, about the importance of variety. 2, we can time activities in an optimal manner, and I'm going to talk about some studies that I've done that show that, for example, if you want to express gratitude, count your blessings, that it matters, if you do it every day or once a week or several times a week. The timing is important. 3, surprise is important. We can actively try to create or be open to unexpected experiences. So, for example, we might deliberately pursue new goals or try new opportunities that may hold surprises for us. Things that are surprising we don't take for granted as easily. We don't adapt to as quickly. And then finally, attention is really, really critical. We have power over how we direct our attention. I actually just read a book. I was asked to blurb a book all about attention. It's all about living a life in where you really direct your attention in ways that create more happiness. So, for example, we might choose practices and strategies that help us focus and appreciate what we have, pausing to savor the good things in our lives is basically a way to direct your attention to the positive things in your life. So attention is really critical. One of my favorite quotes, I'll tell you about some of those 105 pages of quotes that I mentioned at the beginning, is from William James, who, I think it's really a mind-boggling quote. He wrote, "My experience is what I agree to attend to." My experience is what I agree to attend to. So basically, what you pay attention to is your experience. It is your life. So it's really important how you direct your attention. So, okay, to move on, what I do in my studies is if you look at slide 8, I instruct my research participants to practice particular positive activities or strategies on a regular basis, say for 6 weeks or 10 weeks. And then I follow them across time to see whether the exercise makes them happier. Now, and I have a list of some of the interventions that I've done on slide 8. I'm going to describe 3 of them to you today fairly quickly. But, as a basic scientist, I'm not only interested in which activities will work to boost happiness and to sustain happiness, but I'm also really interested in how and why they work. That is, what are the mechanisms, or in technical terms, what are the moderators and mediators that underlie the success of any positive activity? So I'm really interested in that as well. Okay, so just a few studies I just want to tell you about quickly that I've done, just so you get a sense of what researchers are doing, those of you who are not familiar with this work. So in the first study, which is on slide 9, is the list of studies, we tried to induce kindness in our participants by asking people to commit acts of kindness. Now, why did we think that would make people happier? It's almost a stupid question, some people think, because it's almost self-evident sort of why doing acts of kindness would make people happy. But I actually have a list on slide 10 about all the various benefits of being kind to others. The notion that being kind can make you happy actually has deep roots in many cultures, maybe even all cultures. Actually I have a quote from Lao Tzu which sort of summarizes these benefits of kind acts that are listed on slide 10. Kindness in words creates confidence. Kindness in thinking creates profoundness. Kindness in giving creates love. So it's about relationships. It's about feeling good about yourself. Lots of good things about committing generous acts. Now, surprisingly, acts of kindness had not been previously used as part of a formal intervention. So in this study, if you look at slide 11, what we did is we had, this is actually a pretty complicated study. I'm going to try to simplify it for you. We asked participants to do either 3 or 9 acts of kindness a week for a period of 10 weeks, and we were interested in the importance of variety. I mentioned before how variety is really critical, that if you don't vary what you do, you're going to adapt to it, and maybe it might become sort of monotonous. So we had 3 groups of people, those who did lots of different kinds of kind acts, and low variety, that was high variety, low variety, that they had to repeat the same kind acts over and over again. And the control condition just listed 3 or 9 events that happened to them each week. So they were doing something every week, but they were doing a neutral task. In order to track happiness in our various studies, we typically include lots of different standard validated measures of happiness, life satisfaction, and positive emotions, and we combine them into a single index or composite of well-being, and these are listed in slide 12. So these are different measures that we use to measure happiness over time. We always measure it before people start the intervention, sometimes in the middle, after, and we usually have a follow-up period. So on slide 13, you see the instructions that we gave to our subjects, and I'm just going to read the part in green. We would like you to list 15 acts of kindness that you would like to do more in the future. And by the way, when I give workshops, I often will ask people to actually do this right now. Sort of think about kind acts that you'd like to do, say, in the next 2 weeks, and you might want to think about that if you're listening to me. Only write down acts of kindness that are easily repeatable, like maybe doing an extra chore in your household. After you make your list, we ask you to choose 3 or 9 of these acts and do them during the upcoming week. So that's what participants did over the course of 10 weeks. And I'm going to show you again, it was a pretty complicated study and results, and I'm just going to show you one slide of the results. So slide 14 shows changes in happiness over time, and so the higher the number, the higher the line, the happier people are. As you can see that before the study, we have 3 lines. The high variety group, the control group, is blue. The low variety group is in green. And before the study started, they were all the same in happiness. Now, if you look at the red line, people who did varied acts of kindness every week for 10 weeks, they got happier over time. And that happiness, importantly, was sustained or maintained even a month later. So a month after the intervention was over, they were still happier. The control group, who were just listing events that happened to them every week, they basically showed no changes in happiness over time, which is what you'd expect. And then the low variety condition, these are people who kept repeating, the same kinds of acts of kindness. They actually got really unhappy during the intervention. You see the green line going way down, but then they rebounded by the 1 month follow-up. So clearly the kind acts became sort of monotonous to them. I think it was sort of a chore for them to do that. But basically this study shows that giving people the opportunity to spice up their happiness strategies with variety is clearly important, and this finding has obvious implications for what people need to do themselves when they are trying different strategies. They need to vary them the moment they start becoming stale or ineffective. Again, just like you might vary a fitness routine, going to the gym or going hiking or going running. Now, frequency, whether people did 3 or 9 acts of kindness, actually did not make a difference, and that was surprising to us because in other studies we do find frequency to be important. But we can get back to that later if anyone wants to ask me about that later. Okay, so I want to tell you about another study we did where we asked people, this is slide 15, where we asked people to express gratitude and optimism. So we're talking about two other kinds of strategies. This is a study that my graduate student Renee Dickerhoff did, and I. And so what we did in that study, this was if you look at slide 16, this was an 8-week study where for 15 minutes a week people either expressed optimism, expressed gratitude, or they were in the control condition where people just listed what they did over the last 7 days. Now I should say that, sometimes people say to me, wow, 15 minutes a week, that's nothing. I mean, that is so little time. How do you expect people to become happier with such a trivial intervention? And yet they do. So I think that's something to keep in mind. So let me show you sort of what these strategies involve. So the expressive optimism condition is described on slide 17, and this we borrowed and adapted from research by Laura King, where people imagined their life in, say, 10 years. So let me read to you the green. Please take a moment to think about your romantic life in the future, say in 10 years. Imagine that everything has gone as well as it possibly could for you. Now for the next 15 minutes, write about what you imagine. So basically people are imagining that all their dreams have come true, say in 10 years. And every week they focus on a different domain of life. So the first week might be romantic life. Then they might focus on their career or their health or their hobbies, things like that. Okay, and then that's the optimism condition. That was 8 weeks. And then the gratitude condition, we based this on exercise that was developed by Marty Seligman and his colleagues, where people are asked to write gratitude letters. So think of the people, parents, relatives, friends, etc., who have been especially kind to you but have never heard you express your gratitude. Now for the next 15 minutes, write a letter to one of these individuals. Now people were told that, you could write different letters every week, because remember there are 8 weeks of this study. They sometimes will continue the same letter that they're writing from the week before, or several weeks. Now we do not ask them to share the letter. Importantly, Marty studies people do share the letter. And the reason we do that is that we wanted to study sort of the quote-unquote pure effect of gratitude, sort of how just the expression of gratitude, is that going to make you happy? When you share the letter, that contaminates that manipulation a little bit with the social relationship, the social interaction that occurs after the sharing. So we just wanted to study the cognitive part of that strategy, purely expressing gratitude, is that going to make people happier? Okay, so in this study, if you look at slide 19, we're also very interested in the role of motivation or self-selection. Now, in the real world, when people try to make themselves happier, they know what they're doing, they believe in it, they're motivated to do it, they might buy a book, they try to make themselves happier. So we were concerned that in our previous studies, our participants are usually just sort of randomly assigned to express gratitude or do acts of kindness, and they may not be remotely interested in doing it or putting the effort into it. On the other hand, interventions done by other labs often use self-selected participants. So, for example, people who go on a website and they want to be happier and they decide to try the exercises. And so that's problematic in a different way, right, because that's a self-selected population. So we decided to test for this role of self-selection or motivation. So half the participants, which I'm calling the high motivation group or the self-selected group, were specifically recruited into a study that advertised itself as trying to make the people happier. So I'm kind of simplifying this if you look on slide 19. Do you want to become happier? Sign up here to learn more. Or this study is about practicing cognitive exercises. Sign up here to learn more. So the low motivation participants are assumed to sign up for that cognitive exercises study, which, by the way, if you're in a university doing research, many, many studies that are listed sort of on the study website or for students to do are about cognitive exercises. So we're not actually being deceptive because expressing optimism and gratitude is a cognitive activity. And then we have, of course, had a control condition. Now, I should say that once people show up to our laboratory, everyone, including the controls, are then informed that this is a study aimed to make them happier. So at that point, we do kind of equalize. Everyone knows what the study is about. So if you look at slide 20, we have the design of the study. It's called a 2x3 design, 6 groups. And so we have the motivated subjects and the non-motivated subjects, and they're either practicing optimism, practicing gratitude, or in the control condition. And if you look at the ends are the sample sizes in each group, and the white ends, you see I kind of put them in white font, those are the two groups that we expect to become happier over time, the people who are motivated, who are practicing optimism and practicing gratitude. So the idea here is to become happier, you need both a will and a proper way. The will basically is the motivation to become happier, and the proper way is actually using an effective strategy like optimism or gratitude. The control group is not expected to become happier. So what do we find? And again, we had lots and lots of data here. I'm going to show you sort of some highlights. So if you look at slide 21, here are these are histograms. These bars represent changes in happiness from before to after the intervention, and this is overall looking just at the non-motivated versus the motivated subjects. You see the non-motivated subjects actually became less happy over time. The motivated subjects are happier over time, over the course of the intervention relative to the non-motivated. And importantly, in this study, we were able to follow people up 6 months later, which is really actually kind of amazing. 6 months is a long time. Not doing something. Imagine starting an exercise program and then stopping it and then sort of not doing anything for 6 months, and then I follow up. Are you still healthy? Are you still happier? So that's basically what we're doing. So if you look at slide 22, here we have changes in well-being at the 6-month follow-up, and even at the 6-month follow-up, the motivated subjects have increased in happiness significantly more relative to the non-motivated. But the important finding is really the one that's in slide 23. So here you have the motivated and non-motivated, the self-selected and the non-self-selected participants who are either practicing gratitude on the right side or practicing optimism on the left side of the graph. The red bars are the motivated, the green bars are the non-motivated. So you can see that relative to the non-motivated participants, the motivated subjects who are practicing optimism and gratitude are becoming happier over time, over the course of the intervention. And if you look at slide 24, that effect, it's a little bit different, but it still persists even 6 months later, although the trend is not as strong. So I think, again, this is sort of confirms or supports the idea that motivation is important, and also doing the right strategy is important. Now, I want to point out another finding that I think is really important on slide 25. In this study, we were also interested in what factors help make happiness activities more or less effective. These are called moderators. So in other words, we measured a number of moderators in the study. They're factors that increase or decrease the effectiveness of any strategy. In the interest of time, I'm just going to show you one, which is effort. And what we did is, recall that in this study, for 15 minutes once a week, people either expressed gratitude or they expressed optimism or they wrote down what they did that week. And so what we did is we had independent judges code the amount of effort that participants put into the study by rating those narratives each week, sort of how much effort are they putting in. And by the way, I should say that this is a pretty simple task to do because it's very obvious if people are really putting all their hearts into the task or they're not. And so if you look at the graph on slide 25, changes in well-being are on the y-axis. And so if you look at the red line, it shows that if you're practicing either gratitude or optimism, those two sort of what have been shown to be effective strategies to increase happiness, if you have low amount of effort is on the x-axis, you don't get much benefit. If you put an average amount of effort, you get more benefit, and if you have high amount of effort, you see low, average, high, that stands for effort, then you get even more benefit. So in the optimism and gratitude condition, the more effort you put in, the more benefit you get, the happier you get. But look at the green bar; it's completely flat. That means that if you're in the control condition, it doesn't matter how much effort you're putting into it; you're not going to get any happier. So doing something meaningful and doing it with effort really matters. Okay. Just quickly, I want to tell you about another study that I did that basically replicated this design that I just told you about, but across cultures. Now, this is pretty recent data. There was a study that was done by my student Julia Bain. We're still analyzing it, and I'd love to get your feedback on this. And we were interested in the question of whether the model that we have of sort of what determines happiness applies to non-Western cultures. And I know that some of you are really interested in cultural differences. Now, in other cultures other than the West, especially the United States, the pursuit of happiness may not be such a kind of well-supported or constant concern. So Asian cultures, for example, are said to be less supportive of self-expression and self-improvement and the pursuit of individual goals. So it might be considered kind of selfish to be pursuing happiness for yourself in Asian culture. So what we did is we did a preliminary study. We weren't able to go to an Asian country, but we did a study in Southern California that has many East Asian immigrants, and we wanted to compare the East Asian participants with Anglo-American participants. And this was a study where we recruited community members, people residing in the community in Southern California. And so our hypothesis was basically that we believe that the pursuit of happiness is universal, that everyone is going to want to be happier to some extent, but they might pursue it somewhat differently, and they might benefit from it differently. So we thought that maybe Asian Americans might benefit differently or might not benefit as much from our happiness intervention as the Anglo-Americans. So if you look at, slide 27 just kind of summarizes again our design. We have the same three groups, optimism, gratitude, and control. And slide 28 shows you the sort of the six-group design. So we have Anglo-Americans and Asian Americans in these three conditions. And then I hope I'm not going too fast. Am I okay?
No, I think you're doing great.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
So, and I'm almost done because I want to get some questions. Slide 21 just shows some demographics of our sample. We have people from age 20 to age 71. Now, most of the Asian Americans by far were foreign-born, and most of them came from China. But even the ones that were not foreign-born, these are people living in very close-knit Asian communities in Southern California. These are places where the storefronts have Chinese or Vietnamese. So they're very much very much identified with their heritage culture. And I understand, of course, that we're sort of mixing up lots of different Asian cultures here. We didn't have the sample size to only look at one country, but we think that there are more similarities and there are differences for the purposes of our study. Okay, so to go to our results. If you look at slide 30, here I'm going to show you the results for all the cultures, both cultures, and you see that people who practice optimism and those who practice gratitude are becoming happier over the course of the intervention. This is actually from a 1-month follow-up relative to the control group, who are just listing what they did that week, just like in the other study I told you about. So this just is what we would expect, that overall people who are doing these, the treatment conditions who are doing the effective strategies are going to get happier relative to the control group. Now that's not the interesting finding, that's just replicating other studies. But if you look at slide 31, I think this is a really interesting slide. The Anglo-Americans are in green and the Asian Americans are in red. Although someone was just telling me that I should not make Asian Americans red, so maybe I should get some advice about the colors I should choose. Because of communism. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure if that's a concern here. Okay, so what that slide shows on slide 31 is that both the Asian Americans and the Anglo Americans, they benefited from our intervention, because if you look at only the red bars or only the green bars, you see that people who practice optimism and gratitude are benefiting more. They're increasing in well-being more relative to the control group, but you see that the Anglo Americans are benefiting more than the Asian Americans, and there's some evidence that they're putting more effort into the study as well. But then we did something interesting. We looked at other aspects of people's lives, not just their happiness, over the course of the intervention. And if you look at slide 32, we looked at how people's relationships changed over the course of the intervention, that is, their sense of connection with others, intimacy, contact with others. And here you see, slide 32, that the Asian Americans are increasing more in their sense of connection with others after doing this gratitude or optimism intervention. And then if you look at slide 33, the Asian Americans are increasing more in their sense of gratitude relative to Anglos. Now, this also interestingly applies to people who are in the optimism condition as well. So it's really interesting. I mean, the Asian Americans aren't getting as happy as the Anglo Americans, but they are changing in other aspects of their lives. And so, you know, I would love to get your feedback about what this means. I believe that the Asian Americans are not defining happiness the same way as the Anglos, that they are perhaps, it's more closely related to them, to their sense of gratitude and optimism, and relationships. And it reminds me, actually, there's a quote that this finding reminds me of from Bhutan. The director of the Center for Bhutan Studies said once, "We don't believe in this Robinson Crusoe happiness. All happiness is relational. We don't believe in this Robinson Crusoe happiness." There was this idea that you're one person as an island in yourself, right? Remember Robinson Crusoe? And so maybe there's something to that happiness is more relational for the Asian Americans. Okay, so that's it about my studies. I just want to say a couple words. If you look at slide 34, it just shows you some examples of the kinds of studies that my students and colleagues are doing to test the mechanisms that underlie change in happiness. As you can see in slide 24, we've done about half a dozen other interventions. We've looked at other kinds of happiness activities like counting your blessings or savoring the good things in your life. And we've tested other important factors in these interventions like the importance of timing, the importance of expectations. We're also applying our interventions to depressed populations and finding, kind of like Marty Seligman, that depressed people actually are benefiting even more from our interventions than non-depressed people. So basically, that's it. I just wanted to conclude that happiness, even in the hedonic sense of the term, I think is a really critical part of optimal functioning, and it's meaningful to pursue it. It's important to pursue it. It has all these benefits, as we talked about earlier. And so I think it's crucial for researchers, as opposed to self-help gurus, to find out how this can be accomplished, how people can be happier. And the model that I presented today and some results from my interventions, I hope are a good start. And I'm going to end the talk with a quote from Aristotle that nicely summarizes the gist of my work, which is that, slide 35, which is that happiness depends upon ourselves. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's great. Sonia, thank you so much. You did a great job.
Thank you.
I mean, really, of packing your presentation.
It's a lot of material.
Well, there's a lot, but the other thing that I know I speak for everyone on the call is that you bring to life your studies, and so you make them exciting, and for those of us who have sat in your classes before, we're not surprised by how you were so adept at doing that for us today, so really appreciate that.
Thank you.
You bet. Sonia, how about we take a few questions? There are a whole number were submitted. We don't have time for all of them, unfortunately, but we do have some good ones. The first one I'll share with you just came in from Kathy Parsons of the United Kingdom. And her question is, can individuals experience adaptation to negative events just like they can experience hedonic adaptation to positive events?
Right, absolutely. So this is actually a really important question. So most researchers actually have been studying adaptation to negative events. And you know, this is a little bit like why there's a lot more research on the negative side of life than on the positive side of life. And what they find is that people do adapt to a lot of negative events, but not all of them. So for example, it turns out that people don't ever, on average, adapt completely to severe disability, to unemployment, to sort of severe life events. So there's a lot of adaptation that happens to negative life events, but for some events, the more severe life events, people never, on average, go back to their previous baseline. So that is interesting in itself because before, researchers had really believed that people can adapt to almost anything, and that is just not true. But what I had noticed about the literature is that there are all these studies about how people adapt to negative events, but there are very few studies on how people adapt to positive events, and that's really what I'm interested in, because I argue that adaptation to positive events is one of the biggest barriers to increasing happiness, right? Because if you adapt to everything positive that happens to you, then how can you ever become happier? So, and so what the research does find in this area is that people pretty much completely tend to adapt to positive events. So I'm interested, the new model that I mentioned that I've developed with Kim Sheldon, we're now doing research on it. We're applying for a grant from the government for it. We're basically testing how do people adapt to positive things and how to thwart or how to slow down adaptation to positive experiences.
Well, I can tell you all of us will be waiting on the edge of our seats for the results of this research. So we'll surely do this call again. Phil Friedman, member of IPA, has written a question. He says, since Sonia and Ed Diener seem to have different views in their respective books on the issue of happiness set point, would Sonia discuss how these seemingly different viewpoints can be reconciled?
Sure. Really, really nice question. Ed Diener and I actually did a joint interview for a group of mental health professionals and life coaches. And we were asked that question, and it turns out that really we don't really disagree that much. And I'll explain to the members that are listening right now what they're talking about. It turns out it's really a semantic issue here. So basically, I talk about the set point as something that is sort of set at birth. That we have the set point, or you can call it a set range, and that it does not change over time. Now, I also argue that only 50% of happiness, of individual differences in happiness, are determined by the set point, so it doesn't mean that we can't change our happiness. Now, so I make a distinction between our happiness set point and our happiness level, right? And it's a little bit like the weight set point. So you can have a set point for weight. I mean, there are researchers in the area of eating regulation that argue that people are born with a set point for weight, but that doesn't mean that their weight can't be different, right? So actually my set point for weight personally is higher than I like, but I exercise a huge amount, and so I can be thin, I can maintain, a lower weight because of I exercise. And same thing for happiness, that I argue that if your set point for happiness is lower than you like, then you need to work harder at it, right? You have to put a lot of work and effort into it, develop habits. Now, Ed Diener, I think his definition of set point is just different. It's just a different definition. I mean, he sees it more as something, as really more your kind of stable happiness level, which can change. Whereas I define set point as that part of our happiness that is genetically determined. So it's just a semantic difference.
Oh, that makes sense. We appreciate you sharing that. Two top leaders in positive psychology with some powerful thinking. Penny Garner from the U.S., she asks, from your perspective, particularly given the financial turmoil that so many are experiencing around the world, the change that it's bringing on, in addition to reading your terrific new book, as she says, which do you think are the most effective habits people can cultivate when they begin to feel overwhelmed by change?
Right. It's an excellent question. I actually have written a couple of op-ed pieces on this topic. There's one that's going to be published in the Riverside newspaper about that very question, sort of what strategies that can people use to stay happy, even among these challenges and the economy collapsing, people losing jobs, and it's really hard for me to answer sort of what strategies or habits are more important than others. One of the themes of my work and one of the themes of my book is that fit is really important. So it's going to depend on the person. It's going to some strategies are going to be more effective for some people than others. But obviously, I have a chapter in my book on coping and sort of talks about how positive appraisal. How looking at the bright side, staying optimistic is important. Being grateful for what you have is important, sort of focusing on what you have as opposed to, what you don't have or what you might be losing. not comparing yourself to others, not ruminating very much. So basically, any of the happiness strategies that I talk about, apply here, right? Practicing your spirituality, following meaningful life goals, practicing positive thinking, all of these things, savoring, trying to live in the moment, living sort of day to day. All of these things are going to work for some people in coping with the bad stuff, with the bad times. And so again, I can't tell you sort of what is more important than what factors are more important than others, because it's going to depend on you. For you it might be one thing, for someone else it's going to be something else. So I guess that's the best I can come up with.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Sonia, in the spirit of the holidays, we have a live question for you from our Associate Executive Director, Debbie. Debbie, go ahead.
Live?
Yeah.
Yes, Sonia, I get to ask this question myself. Now, I was watching with great interest throughout your presentation, and I wonder if you had any specific ideas about interventions or things that might help make somebody happier who is craving an extraordinarily large piece of pie.
Or someone who's craving
an extraordinarily large piece of pie, because that's what I keep seeing.
Right now. Well, I think you should go have the piece of pie. I actually made, I've tried to make pies, every year, like for Thanksgiving, and it never works out. The pie crust does not work out. I finally made this amazing pie this Thanksgiving, and I actually took a picture of it. I cut out, we ate 40% of it, and I took a photo of it. I'm going to use it in some of my slides now. Moderation and everything, right? So as long
exactly.
As moderation, yeah. But we sort of get to the question that really Bob Fredrickson would be best to answer here, is about the importance of pleasures, of momentary positive emotion. I mean, that pie, as long as you don't overdo it, it makes you feel guilty, but it can give you that momentary positive boost. That's going to make you feel more creative, more energetic, more sociable, more productive at work. It's going to have all these positive downstream benefits. So I encourage you to go have that piece of pie.
40%, huh? Okay.
Yeah, well, not 40% of the pie. And notice that I have a different pie on my two book covers.
I did notice that. And maybe if I share that huge piece of pie, that would make me happier.
Yes. Oh, yes. And of course, there's work now that shows that sharing, right? So giving money away is going to make you happier than if you get money for yourself. Sharing makes you even happier than getting stuff for yourself.
Great. That's very helpful. Thank you so much.
Well, I think a couple of great insights. Now we all know that we need to include food in all of our PowerPoint presentations. So we'll trigger positive emotion there. And maybe we have a new series that we could start, would be positive psychology recipes with our positive psychology.
Oh, I love that.
Well, how fun was that?
I'll share my recipe, which I got from a newspaper.
Oh, that would be fantastic. So we'll be back in touch on that. We're coming up on the top of the hour, and I want to say again, Sonia, thank you for being with us today. It's just a pleasure to have the opportunity to engage with you. There's so many people a part of IPA who are researchers, they're clinicians, they're trainers, they're in companies that are managing and leading, and just to get your perspective today was just super helpful. And thank you again.
Oh, thank you. It's great to do this.
Yeah, so I want to thank everyone again today for joining us. You again have come from so many countries around the world. We were thrilled to be able to put this series on this year. I want to make sure everyone knows that you can get a recording of this talk. We'll be available to you soon after the conclusion of this call. We are going to send an email to let everyone know when it is available on our site. So again, if you're listening now in the future and you missed us live and you're listening now, we're glad that you listened to us via the future here with listening to the recording. And again, thank you for making this historical experience a positive one for us in the Positive Psychology Leader Series. Next year, we have a great lineup of speakers, and we'll email you later this month to share the exciting news. So thank you again for joining us, everyone. We really appreciate your membership in IPA. Remember to tell your friends and colleagues about IPA. And wherever you are in the world, make it a great day or night. Have a great week, and happy holidays to everyone. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude today's conference call. We'd like to thank you all for your participation, and have a great day.